The most successful people in the world share a secret weapon that costs nothing, requires no special training, and becomes more powerful the more you use it. It's not what they say, it's what they deliberately choose not to say, and when they choose not to say it. This single skill separates leaders from followers, experts from amateurs, and strategic thinkers from reactive responders. Here are the 6 fundamental mechanisms through which strategic silence transforms your brain, your biology, and your influence. 1. Neural optimization through silence. When you deliberately choose silence over immediate verbal response, you're triggering a cascade of neural activity that fundamentally rewires your brain's architecture for superior performance. The prefrontal cortex, located directly behind your forehead, begins orchestrating what neuroscientists call executive processing, a sophisticated form of mental computation that occurs only when you create space between stimulus and response. During these moments of strategic silence, your default mode network becomes highly active. This network, discovered through advanced neuroimaging studies, consists of interconnected brain regions including the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus. These areas work together to synthesize disparate pieces of information, forming novel connections that conscious, linear thinking simply cannot achieve. The magic happens at the cellular level. Silence triggers the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that acts like fertilizer for your neurons. BDNF doesn't just maintain existing neural pathways, it actively promotes the growth of new synaptic connections, literally expanding your brain's processing capacity. Studies using diffusion tensor imaging show that individuals who regularly practice strategic silence develop increased white matter integrity, meaning faster and more efficient communication between brain regions. Your hippocampus, the brain's primary memory consolidation center, becomes particularly active during strategic silence. It begins cross-referencing current situations with stored experiences, identifying patterns and potential outcomes that your conscious mind might miss. This process, called memory reconsolidation, allows you to access insights and solutions that seem to appear from nowhere, but are actually the result of sophisticated subconscious processing. The anterior cingulate cortex, your brain's conflict monitoring system, also benefits dramatically from strategic silence. This region becomes more sensitive to detecting inconsistencies, contradictions, and opportunities that others overlook. Meanwhile, the insula, which processes interoceptive awareness, your ability to sense internal bodily signals, becomes more active, giving you better access to gut instincts and emotional intelligence. Perhaps most remarkably, strategic silence enhances neuroplasticity throughout your entire brain. The temporary reduction in external verbal processing frees up enormous amounts of neural energy that gets redirected towards strengthening existing connections and forming new ones. This neuroplastic enhancement continues for hours after periods of strategic silence, meaning your brain literally becomes more capable and adaptable with each deliberate pause you create. 2. The dopamine advantage, the neurochemical reward system in your brain, operates on 2 distinct pathways when it comes to strategic silence, and understanding this distinction is crucial for optimizing your decision-making capabilities. When you speak immediately or react impulsively, you trigger what researchers call phasic dopamine release, a quick burst of this neurotransmitter that provides instant gratification but rapidly depletes, leaving you seeking the next verbal interaction or reaction to maintain that neurochemical high. Strategic silence, however, activates an entirely different dopamine pathway. Instead of the immediate spike and crash, silence engages your brain's tonic dopamine system, a sustained, steady release that builds anticipation and enhances cognitive function over extended periods. This tonic release occurs primarily in the ventral tegmental area and substantia nigra, brain regions that project dopaminergic neurons throughout your prefrontal cortex and striatum. What makes this fascinating is that your brain begins to associate the restraint itself with reward. Each time you choose silence over immediate response, you're strengthening neural pathways in the anterior cingulate cortex that link self-control with positive outcomes. This creates what neuroscientists call a metacognitive reward loop. Your brain literally learns to find pleasure in the act of strategic thinking rather than just in the outcome of actions. The dopamine receptors in your prefrontal cortex, particularly the D1 and D2 receptor subtypes, become more sensitive through regular practice of strategic silence. This increased sensitivity means you need less external stimulation to achieve the same level of motivation and focus. You're essentially training your brain to generate its own sustained motivation through thoughtful restraint rather than requiring constant external validation or immediate gratification. Research using positron emission tomography scans reveals that individuals who regularly practice strategic silence show increased dopamine transporter availability in the striatum, indicating more efficient dopamine recycling and utilization. This translates to better impulse control, enhanced working memory, and improved ability to delay gratification for superior long-term outcomes. The temporal dynamics are equally important. While immediate verbal responses create dopamine spikes that last mere seconds, strategic silence generates dopamine activity that can persist for minutes or even hours. This sustained neurochemical state enhances pattern recognition, creative problem solving, and strategic planning. Your brain maintains an optimal level of arousal and attention without the energy crashes associated with reactive communication patterns. Most remarkably, this dopamine advantage becomes self-reinforcing. The more you practice strategic silence, the more your brain craves these periods of thoughtful restraint, creating a positive feedback loop that continuously enhances your cognitive capabilities and emotional regulation. 3. Social influence through restraint. Your strategic silence doesn't exist in a vacuum. It creates profound neurological changes in everyone around you through sophisticated mechanisms of social neuroscience. When you maintain composed silence in social situations, you're activating mirror neuron systems in other people's brains, specifically clusters located in the premotor cortex, inferior parietal lobule, and parts of the superior temporal sulcus. These neurons fire both when you perform an action and when others observe that action, creating a direct neural bridge between your internal state and theirs. The fascinating aspect is that mirror neurons respond not just to what you do, but to what you deliberately choose not to do. When others observe your strategic restraint, their mirror neuron systems begin modeling your composed, thoughtful state. This triggers activation in their anterior cingulate cortex and anterior insula brain regions, responsible for empathy, emotional regulation, and perspective taking. Essentially, your silence becomes contagious at the neurological level, elevating the cognitive functioning of everyone in your presence. Functional magnetic resonance imaging studies reveal that when one person in a group maintains strategic silence, it reduces amygdala activation in other group members. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, becomes less reactive when exposed to composed, silent confidence. This creates what researchers call emotional downregulation through social modeling, where your calm presence literally helps others think more clearly and make better decisions by reducing their stress response. Your strategic silence also activates the temporoparietal junction in observers, a brain region crucial for theory of mind, the ability to understand what others are thinking and feeling. This increased activation makes others more perceptive, more considerate, and more likely to engage in deeper, more meaningful communication when they do speak. They begin unconsciously matching your level of thoughtfulness and intentionality. The neurochemical cascade extends beyond just neural activation. When others observe your strategic silence, their own serotonin and oxytocin levels increase, neurotransmitters associated with trust, bonding, and social cooperation. Meanwhile, their cortisol levels decrease, indicating reduced stress and improved cognitive flexibility. This creates an optimal neurochemical environment for collaboration, problem solving, and genuine connection. Perhaps most powerfully, your strategic silence triggers what neuroscientists call mentalizing networks in others' brain systems that activate when people are trying to understand intentions and predict behavior. This makes others more attentive to you, more curious about your thoughts, and more likely to seek your input when you do choose to speak, dramatically amplifying your influence and impact in any social situation. 4. Biological performance enhancement. When you choose strategic silence over immediate verbal response, you're initiating a cascade of physiological changes that optimize your entire body for peak performance. The moment you resist the urge to speak reactively, your autonomic nervous system undergoes a fundamental shift from sympathetic dominance, the fight or flight state, to parasympathetic activation, often called the rest and digest mode. This isn't just a metaphor, it's a measurable biological transformation that affects every system in your body. Your vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve extending from your brainstem to your abdomen, becomes significantly more active during strategic silence. This nerve serves as the primary communication highway between your brain and your major organs, and when it's optimally functioning, it triggers what researchers call the vagal tone response. High vagal tone correlates with better emotional regulation, improved immune function, enhanced digestion, and superior cardiovascular health. Strategic silence literally strengthens this crucial neural pathway. Heart rate variability, the subtle variation in time between heartbeats, increases dramatically during periods of strategic silence. This isn't about your heart rate slowing down, it's about the sophisticated rhythm patterns that indicate optimal autonomic nervous system balance. Higher heart rate variability is associated with better stress resilience, enhanced cognitive flexibility, and improved decision-making under pressure. Elite athletes and high-performing executives consistently show higher HRV patterns, and strategic silence is one of the most effective ways to train this physiological marker. Your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the body's primary stress response system, undergoes significant regulation during strategic silence. Cortisol levels, your primary stress hormone, begin declining within minutes of choosing thoughtful restraint over reactive speech. Lower cortisol doesn't just reduce stress, it enhances memory consolidation, improves immune function, reduces inflammation, and optimizes testosterone and growth hormone production. You're literally creating better biochemistry through behavioral choice. The inflammatory response in your body also shifts during strategic silence. Pro-inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha decrease, while anti-inflammatory markers increase. This has profound implications for everything from brain function to cellular repair to longevity. Chronic inflammation is linked to virtually every age-related disease, and strategic silence provides a powerful tool for managing this fundamental biological process. Your respiratory patterns automatically optimize during strategic silence, shifting toward deeper, more efficient breathing that maximizes oxygen delivery to your brain and tissues. This enhanced oxygenation improves cellular energy production, supports neurotransmitter synthesis, and maintains optimal EP balance in your blood, creating the ideal internal environment for sustained high performance across all domains of function. 5. Cognitive resource management. Every word you speak requires an enormous expenditure of cognitive resources that most people never recognize. When you engage in verbal communication, your brain simultaneously activates multiple complex networks: Broca's area for speech production, Wernicke's area for language comprehension, the angular gyrus for semantic processing, and the superior temporal gyrus for auditory processing. Additionally, your prefrontal cortex manages executive functions like word selection, grammatical construction, social appropriateness, monitoring, and response prediction. This creates what psychologists call cognitive load, the total amount of mental effort being utilized at any given moment. The brain operates with finite processing capacity, much like a computer with limited RAM. When significant cognitive resources are dedicated to speech production and social monitoring, less capacity remains available for higher-order thinking processes. Strategic silence immediately frees up this massive cognitive bandwidth, redirecting neural energy toward pattern recognition, creative problem solving, emotional regulation, and strategic analysis. Neuroimaging studies using functional MRI reveal that during periods of strategic silence, increased activation occurs in the default mode network, the salience network, and the central executive network brain systems responsible for insight, attention allocation, and complex reasoning. Your working memory, the mental workspace where you manipulate information, operates more efficiently during strategic silence. Without the constant demand of formulating and monitoring verbal responses, your working memory capacity effectively expands, allowing you to hold more variables in mind simultaneously and detect relationships that would otherwise go unnoticed. This enhanced working memory function translates directly into better decision-making, improved problem-solving, and increased creative output. The phenomenon extends to attentional resources as well. Speech production requires continuous attentional monitoring. You must track your audience's reactions, adjust your message in real time, monitor for social cues, and prepare follow-up responses. Strategic silence eliminates these attentional demands, allowing you to focus entirely on observation, analysis, and pattern detection. Your brain becomes like a high-powered telescope that's no longer vibrating suddenly. You can see details and connections that were previously invisible. Metacognitive awareness, your ability to think about your own thinking, also improves dramatically during strategic silence. Without the cognitive overhead of speech production, you gain clearer insight into your own mental processes, emotional states, and decision-making patterns. This enhanced self-awareness creates a feedback loop that continuously improves your cognitive efficiency and strategic thinking capabilities, making each subsequent period of silence even more cognitively productive than the last. 6. Status and power dynamics. The relationship between silence and social status operates through deeply ingrained neurological mechanisms that have evolved over millions of years of human social interaction. When you feel compelled to fill every silence, explain yourself constantly, or react immediately to provocations, you're activating neural pathways associated with submission and social anxiety. Your brain's threat detection systems, particularly the amygdala and anterior cingulate cortex, interpret this reactive behavior as a signal of lower social position, triggering stress responses that further diminish your presence and influence. Conversely, strategic silence activates entirely different neural circuits associated with dominance and confidence. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which processes self-referential thinking and social status, shows increased activation when you demonstrate comfort with silence. This brain region communicates your internal sense of security and control to other neural networks, creating a coherent neurological state of confidence that others can detect through subtle behavioral cues, vocal tonality, and even pheromonal signals. Mirror neuron research reveals that when others observe your strategic silence, their brains automatically begin modeling your internal state. If you're comfortable with silence, their mirror neuron systems activate patterns associated with confidence and security. If you're frantically trying to fill every pause, their brains mirror that anxiety and uncertainty. This creates what researchers call emotional contagion, but the direction of influence depends entirely on your neurological state during silence. The orbitofrontal cortex, crucial for social cognition and status assessment, processes strategic silence as a display of what psychologists term resource abundance. When you don't feel compelled to compete for verbal space or defend your position immediately, it signals to both your brain and others' brains that you possess sufficient social resources, confidence, competence, and security to remain composed under pressure. This triggers respect responses in the reward centers of observers' brains, specifically increased dopamine activity in their ventral striatum. Testosterone levels actually increase during periods of strategic silence when you're maintaining social composure while cortisol levels decrease. This hormonal shift enhances your sense of personal power and reduces stress-related behaviors that might undermine your social position. Meanwhile, your posture naturally improves, your breathing deepens, and your vocal patterns become more resonant when you do speak, all unconscious behavioral changes that further reinforce perceptions of higher status. Perhaps most significantly, strategic silence demonstrates what researchers call cognitive bandwidth availability, the ability to process complex information without being overwhelmed. This signals superior intellectual resources to others, triggering deference responses and increasing your perceived competence and leadership potential in any social or professional context. Starting today, I challenge you to implement one specific protocol. Before responding to any emotionally charged situation, pause for exactly 3 seconds. Count them. 1, 2, 3. During those 3 seconds, your prefrontal cortex will activate, your stress hormones will begin to regulate, and your strategic thinking will come online. This isn't about being passive, it's about training your nervous system to access its highest capabilities when they matter most.